Hello everyone and welcome back to the Chosen Aftershow, your favorite place to watch two people talk about the show that they just watched about Jesus. My name is Lance Marshall. I'm one of the pastors at the First United Methodist Church in downtown Fort Worth, and here with me today is my co-watcher, my co-studier, my co-thinker, my co-host in the Chosen Aftershow, Zheyna Gurina-Rodriguez. Zheyna, thank you so much for being back with me again.
Yep.
Thanks to you who've been joining us online. We air these live on Thursday nights. However, on Tuesday nights. However, you can always go back and catch up. If you go to the church's Facebook page, FUMC Fort Worth on Facebook, you can click the videos tab and you can find more episodes. You can also find ways to connect with us in worship and a bunch of other different ways. So we are on episode 4 today of season 2. But if you want to go back and catch the first 3 or season 1, you can do that right on our church's Facebook page. Okay, speaking of episode 4, the perfect opportunity, let's start with the recap. Our episode begins with a dialogue-free telling of the story of a young boy paralyzed at a young age by a tragic fall. His difficult life is made easier by his close relationship with his younger brother, who is obviously vitally important to him. As teenagers, the two boys witness the violent mistreatment of fellow Jews by Roman soldiers, and the younger brother is radicalized. He leaves his family, including his paralyzed older brother who needs him, and who is suddenly alone in the world. The opening story concludes with the younger brother joining a secretive militia in the mountains, and the older brother spending decades beside a mysterious pool, hoping for a miraculous healing, but receiving none. After the credits, we see more of the younger brother. We learn his name is Simon. He has trained for years as a zealot, a capital Z zealot, a group of Jews willing to use violence against the Roman occupiers. As they train, a secretive man observes them from a distance. The leaders of the zealots dispatch Simon on an assassination mission to Jerusalem. Succeed or don't bother returning, they say. Meanwhile, the disciples are at work constructing a tent for the Feast of Tabernacles. More on that later. Inside Jerusalem, we see two Pharisees, including our old friend Shmuel from season 1. Shmuel's back. He's come to
Our
Shmuel. He's come to Jerusalem to preach, and specifically to preach about the dangers of following heretical teachings. He's spotted by Matthew, who recognizes Shmuel from his attempt to undermine Jesus in Capernaum. He returns to camp to spread the alarm. Also in town is Atticus, the mysterious man from earlier. He's an investigator on behalf of the Romans, following Simon and planning to foil his assassination plot. Simon is unaware that he is not only dangerous, but very much in danger. Atticus is a formidable opponent, and he begins to plan how to not only thwart Simon, but to execute him in the midst of his assassination attempt. When Jesus hears of Shmuel's arrival in Jerusalem, he gets an idea. Entering into town, he pauses to reflect on those suffering crucifixion outside of Jerusalem's walls. Outside of the temple, Simon hears a scripture reading that includes God's promises to save the lame, and he's compelled to seek out his brother. He finds his brother, Jesse, at the pool, filthy, emaciated, and empty of hope. There is a massive gulf between them, both because they've spent 25 years apart from each other, and also they have vastly different understandings of what it is to be faithful and good. As they angrily part, Jesse reveals he's kept Simon's goodbye letter with him all these years. It includes the faithful passage, "When I see you stand on 2 legs, I'll know the Messiah has come." Foreshadowing! Jesus, John, Simon, and Matthew enter the pool of Bethsaida. Jesus approaches Jesse, the one who's been there the longest and doesn't belong, he says. Watching him are a group of Pharisees. He asks Jesse a simple question: do you want to be healed? Jesse thinks he's offering a lift into the water. He can't see past that hope as the only avenue for healing. You don't need this pool, Jesus says. You only need me. And you can guess what happens next. He is healed, and in a fit of joy, the man finds himself standing for the first time since he was a young child. Almost immediately after picking up his mat to head to a different location, he's confronted by a Pharisee who points out that in doing so, Jesse is breaking Shabbat traditions and therefore sinning in their eyes. As Simon carefully enacts his assassination plot, he doesn't realize that Atticus has sprung a trap. If Simon attacks, he is surely going to be killed. Just as he is about to act, he catches a glimpse of his brother Jesse miraculously walking. Simon abandons the attack and runs to see his brother and find out what has happened. Walking outside of town, the disciples asked why Jesus chose to heal Jesse on Shabbat versus waiting just a few more minutes for the sun to go down, the day of observance to be over, and thereby avoiding conflict. Sometimes Jesus says, you just need to stir up the water. Yeah. Zheyna, season 2, episode 4. When you think back on this episode, what sticks out? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I love that sense of humor.
Yeah.
I love that. I know more than you guys do, and I'm gonna joke about it.
That's exactly right.
I like that.
Yeah,
that made me chuckle.
He did that with our Shmuel.
Our
Shmuel. Yeah, our Shmuel. There were a lot of good funny moments. I remember at the very beginning, Andrew just having his hands up and like, pick me, I want to go. And just making me laugh because that just sounds like me and my brother.
It sounds like when you stop doing that.
Yeah, when you stop doing that, we can go. Yeah, and that what sticks out to me actually when I was watching this, I watched it 2 times, and when I was beginning to watch it the second time, I was thinking to myself, this is legitimately good television. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's been. I want to be very frank because we do things like nitpicking and stuff here. I really enjoy the show. I appreciate the show. I like watching the show. I look forward to it. And I began talking to people about the show feeling like I had to give the caveat. Yeah, it's a Christian show, but it's really good. But it still kind of had that caveat for a Christian show. Yeah. For a Christian show. In this episode in particular, I think you could be a person who has no Christian convictions or faith backgrounds, and it's the reality of the stories, the way they intertwine the stories of Simon and Jesse as a child, them parting ways, Simon and this coming conflict with Atticus. I mean,
military training camp.
Military montage. We had a good montage. It's a good it's legitimately good TV.
Yeah.
And I just want to congratulate those who have been a part of making it. Just good TV. And there's enough good TV around right now where I feel like, there's a pretty high bar to clear, and it really just is legitimately good. All right, so that's what sticks out to me is, man, this is a good show, and I'm happy to watch it some more. And what's surprising though? What sticks out at you when you watch the show? What kind of surprised you?
So this episode, I really picked up on this whole idea that Jesus knows so much more.
Yeah.
He knows where, when, why, how.
You didn't get that when he saw Nathaniel under the tree?
I'm getting there.
Okay,
it takes me sometimes a couple of episodes to catch up.
Let's dwell a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, but we're gonna meet someone, and it's just,
I know him. I know his story.
I know him. This kind of suspense around that, and how disciples just kind of oh cool, where are we going? Who are we gonna meet?
Something cool's gonna happen. Yeah.
We're you're taking me too. Great. But yeah, I like how they're staging Jesus as knowing much more.
Yeah.
When he's talking to people, he's asking a question, do you want to be healed? But we know that behind that question, he knows the whole story.
Yeah. In a really good way, I think the creators of the show are doing a good job in their writing, and the actor in his portrayal of Jesus is that he knows so much more, but that doesn't make him seem disconnected from everybody. It makes him seem deeply connected to everybody.
Yes.
Which I think is a really important aspect of how I understand Jesus. His knowing of everything doesn't mean he just kind of floats through life disconnected from everybody and their concerns.
Or he acts superior.
Yeah.
And I think sense of humor is something that he just connects with people with. On that, I do know more. So what makes the bubbles, come up? Well, somebody's gonna figure that out.
And
later.
they're gonna tell everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah. I don't need to explain to you thermodynamics or things like that.
Yeah. But so it's good.
I really like that. I like the way it's very humanizing and very personal. Those are some subtle ways that I think make the show really high quality. Is that they don't sit down and say Jesus knows everything, yet it results in him being closer to people rather than they just show it, right? Again, I'm not a film student, but I understand one of the basics. There's a big difference in writing or in show making. Don't tell us what happened. Show us what happened. Don't describe it. Show us. I think they do a good job of that. One of the things that surprised me is one in the very beginning when Atticus is going into town, I believe. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
No, Simon.
When Simon was going into town, and the matter-of-fact nature of the crucifixions, right? They were just being crucified in the midst of the hustle and bustle. Yeah. So it's just another day in the life of the Roman centurions. It's another day in the life of the people of Israel. It obviously has meaning, but it's also life. It's just matter of fact.
It's public and it's right there.
Yeah. It's just executions. Here we are. People are just being viciously murdered in your that's just I can't imagine. So the psychological weight and trauma that is a part of that was just really surprising. I'd never seen a crucifixion displayed as a background element before, right? Whenever I've seen a crucifixion displayed in media, it's always been this is happening right here, and this was well, for these people, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so that was really surprising and powerful.
But at the same time, it's not that they are so immune to it that they don't notice it anymore.
Oh, for sure.
Because Simon, remember, he returns back and there is like a scene where he looks.
That's true.
When he's, thinking like.
Well, part of that too is because remember they said these men are being.
They're murderers.
For murders.
Yeah.
He's on the edge of murder. And so, that was a thing. And then another thing that was surprising to me, and this is skipping ahead in the narrative of the episode, but we see Shmuel teaching, right? Shmuel's got a little box, and he's got some people that he's talking to.
He got a soapbox.
Yeah, and Shmuel's teaching. And one of the things that we haven't seen it in the show, but it's in the Gospels, is people saying to Jesus, you don't teach like the scribes or the Pharisees. You teach like someone who has authority. And it was really interesting because in this show, you get a chance to see a Pharisee teaching. And the Pharisee's like, don't do this, don't do that. And you see a Pharisee teaching. And you realize all of Jesus' teachings were so different than that.
Yes.
It was a chance to actually imagine a little bit of what it was like for an audience person to see the difference between a religious leader like Shmuel with all of his arraignment, his adornment, and standing up on the box and don't do this and don't do that, and etc., and kind of didactic in his way, and then versus Jesus, who's dressed so differently, carries himself so differently, has such a, and you could start to understand when people say, you don't teach like the scribes and the Pharisees. You teach like someone whose authority comes from who you are and what you know, not just what you've been taught in the school you're a part of. So that was it was a small element of the show. It was just a couple lines, but it surprised me and it stuck out. So getting into that, one of the things we like to do is help take things that are in the show that it might help have a little bit more of a background information to pull some more content out of. We call this things to know. So Zheyna, what's your thing to know for this show?
Just a little detail before Shmuel gets on his box.
We are obsessed with Shmuel.
I love Shmuel.
We love Shmuel. Like he's back, and this is all Shmuel episode of the Aftershow.
I love how his name also has the Jewish pronunciation rather than Samuel, which would be like the anglicized version of it.
Okay.
We're going with Shmuel. So before he gets on his box, the other Pharisee kind of tells him, okay, this is the market, this is where you're gonna teach, get the box. And then they have this moment where the Pharisee recites a prayer. But Shmuel kind of interrupts it. So the only thing that the Pharisee is able to say is, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who bestows good things upon the unworthy, and then he gets cut off. So I looked up where that comes from. Not really in our Old Testament scripture. It is recorded in Mishnah, which is kind of an equivalent of our book of worship. The preachers have book of worship where there are all kinds of prayers and liturgies for all kinds of occasions.
It's shared, but it's not scripture.
And Mishnah was compiled in the 2nd and 3rd century, but it was compiled from something that already existed, so it's not really strange that a Pharisee would recite that prayer, even though our written versions of it are from later. I was a little bit kind of baffled how Shmuel interrupted the prayer. It's I don't know, maybe it's my perception, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Pharisees also could be a little bit disrespectful to liturgy. I don't know, but he doesn't let him finish. He doesn't have the posture of we're doing this blessing. He's got, hey, this is a blessing for life-threatening situations. What are you getting me into, So I don't know. Not something that I expected, because it is a prayer that is specifically written for certain situations, usually recited in a congregational setting. It's kind of like you would start saying, I don't know, our Father who art in heaven. Why are you praying this prayer? So there is some kind of a humor in it. But that's where the prayer comes from. And that's why, and it has a very specific purpose. It's like when you are released from jail, when you go on some kind of a travel, that's when you recite that prayer.
Well, and speaking of, what brought Shmuel to Jerusalem was a special holiday, and it was the Feast of the Tabernacles, the Festival of Tabernacles, and they had alluded to a bunch of different things. There's going to be a lot of people in town, that this is why bad teachers might come here to try to take advantage of the large crowds. And the conversation between Jesse and Simon talking about, you came, right? for all these times of worship and celebration. In the conversations earlier, Simon's like, yeah, I've brought Eden to do things, etc. And so they're alluding to a bunch of stuff, but not really explaining it. So kind of to draw a little tighter picture together, in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16, there's the scripture that says, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. So that's a scripture command that they have, and the way that it lives and works in their community is that 3 different times a year, men who were able to do so physically would travel. It was an obligation, and the way that actually worked out in their society, I'm sure was complicated, like every religious obligation is complicated. But the long story short is you're supposed to go into town and be a part of religious observances. And so that's what this entails, and it's going to be a really large crowd. So the first is in Hebrew, we're going to have to forgive some of my Hebrew pronunciation here, but there's Pesach, which is the Passover, right? When we talk about the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, that's a recognition and celebration of being drawn out of Egypt, right? Of God bringing the people of Israel out of subjugation to Pharaoh. There's Shavuot, which is also called the Festival of Weeks. It has a couple different things. One, it coincides with the harvest, which is, of course, incredibly close to the identity of the people of Israel as someone for whom God provides. It's also tied to the understanding of the giving of Torah, of God revealing Torah to Moses. And so it's a celebration, not only being drawn out of slavery, but being given Torah. And then there's the Feast of Tabernacles, this festival. It's a week-long festival, and it, like they alluded to in the show, involves a lot of eating and being outside. And the booths themselves, the Festival of Booths, it's often called, are an act of worship and remembrance of the time in wilderness and this time of reliance on God. So that was woven very nicely into the show. They alluded to all of it, so just to tie it a little bit together, that's a faithful Jewish observance in this time of Second Temple Israel, and it's not only an individual act, but it's a big communal act, and it'll result in things like things being really crowded in town. For example, when to skip ahead, at what we call Pentecost will coincide with the Festival of Weeks in the ancient Jewish observance, and so when something like the Pentecost moment in the book of Acts happens, and Simon and the disciples start to have these tongues, and they're able to speak to people from all over the area in all their different languages. Well, that's why it's so packed, is because Jerusalem is filled with all these people doing their faithful observances to that portion of their heritage. And so that's
celebrating.
And celebrating comes in, and that's how it ties together. Yeah, which is why in the book of Acts, are they drunk? It's only early in the morning. So anyway, seeing how these things kind of tie together, that's one of the reasons why understanding the Jewish culture from which Jesus emerges is so powerful for us in our Christian observance and understanding. So we're stepping a little bit back away from the segment of what did Edwin and Elizabeth think, because again, the online nature of the show has been making watching it with spouses harder, and because thankfully we're not in quarantine. But Edwin did get a chance to point out some things, right?
Yes, because you told me, hey, Edwin needs to watch that episode, there's knives there. Now, so my husband does love knives because he's a martial arts instructor, and he particularly loves Filipino martial arts, which is anything that has to do with a knife, a sword, a machete, a stick. And we have all of those things spread around the house.
I'm sure your kids love that.
Absolutely childproof. Anyway, so he did watch the episode. He enjoyed it, and there is a few seconds where we see Simon practicing his knife technique, and Edwin was commenting pretty positive about it. He said that's a clean technique. That's good.
Good for them. That doesn't happen by accident. You gotta work at that.
A lot of times, actually, when he watches something on TV that has to do with knives and swords, he's like, no, that's gonna get you killed yourself. So that was a step up, because normally I hear from him, don't ever do that with a knife, because that's gonna, you're gonna cut yourself before
you find yourself in an assassination attempt, make sure to handle yourself differently.
Yeah. So he was pretty impressed with Simon, with his Zilla training.
All right, they got good training.
Yeah, he said it's a very basic move. It kind of goes X,
I'm so
blade pointed away from you. It's a foundation for what he does in Filipino martial arts. Then that wrestling scene where they're kind of grabbing each other, they're crawling on the floor, whatever. To me, that looks like whatever's happening. He assessed it. He's like, yes, that's grappling, basic grappling wrestling techniques. commercial. If you want to learn any of those ancient Jewish zealot methods of self-defense with a knife or wrestling, Texas Defense Academy in Benbrook, Texas teaches all of those methods.
See, guys, I wanted you to know. Wonderful.
No, seriously, Edwin is like, yeah, this is a good move. Do you want me to show you how it works? And I'm like, no.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. We got to. Everyone's got a different connection point. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, he was very impressed with that. He's like, yeah, that's exactly what Batman does. You know,
the show's got something for everybody. Okay, all this is the prelude to the real highlight of the show: nitpicking. Well, it's when we sit down and look at the show and look at aspects of the show. Maybe this is execution. Maybe something we just go, I don't know. You got any nitpicks for the show this week?
Yeah, it's more of a broad thought.
Too many people are reading. Is that it?
No,
okay.
I told you I'm going to give up on that. I am not going to mention it. I know there was a book that was in the episode. Totally, those books didn't exist. There is a letter that he writes for his brother, that his brother is keeping that letter. That is pristine. It's clean.
Yeah, I've kept it perfect
for
together
20-something years while I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay, good.
I'm not going to talk about it anymore at all. I'm not going to mention it.
I won't ask.
You're horrible. You made me talk about it. So what I was gonna talk about today is stepping back and thinking of the influence that this show, they're shooting what, for like 8 seasons?
7.
7 seasons is planned. So it's gonna be in our lives, if we choose to, for quite a while.
Yeah, hope so.
What kind of an influence will this show have on us? I was, a few months ago, now this is a confession, many of you probably were like, yeah, I knew that, but I didn't. A few months ago, I found out that Dallas Jenkins, who is the director of this show, has a very famous father.
In certain circles.
Yes,
very
in
famous.
This part of the world.
Yes.
So his father is the co-author of Left Behind series. I didn't know about it. I actually found out what Left Behind is when I already moved to the United States. Nicolas Cage version. That was my introduction to it.
Okay.
So what Left Behind, you know, whatever, many books, many versions, TV series, movies, all built around a certain interpretation of the Book of Revelation.
A very new one.
Okay, so there is a rapture, people just disappear, planes crash, fire, some people survive, then they have to deal with Antichrist and all of that. So it's an interpretation of a scripture, but it's done in a very good TV version, and the writing itself was capturing. It was apparently a bestseller.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
So what I see now that came out from the popularity of that show is that when I teach Intro to New Testament, and there is always...
This is confession time, guys, because I've been here too.
There is always usually the last lesson in the semester where you get to the Book of Revelation. And by then, as an instructor, you think, well, I've taught you all kinds of new things. I've helped you see the scripture in a different way. We have just, experienced you reading the letters of Paul, maybe not in the way that you read it. And you just have so much hope that when you get to the Book of Revelation, the students are going to be like, now I know how I can read the scripture in many different ways.
Yeah.
And every single time I teach Intro to Bible, there is this huge disappointment that hits me, because when you get to the Book of Revelation, whether people watched Left Behind or not, whether they're even aware of it or not, they are so set on this particular interpretation.
Conditioned to
I feel like, I don't know if it's in the water, if it's part of the culture, but if you ask what the Book of Revelation is about, it's, people...
The 1,000-year reign of the Antichrist, whatever.
The Antichrist, the wars, God sending the plagues, and that, and all of this is going to happen, and these are the signs, for this to happen in the future, and that's why we have so much fear, and this is the image of God that we carry. It just goes on and on and on, and it's so hard to battle against that interpretation and say, hey, there is other way you can read the scripture.
Yeah.
I know you preached the sermon series on the book of Revelation.
That's right. What does
and-
Revelation reveal? Which was a 7-part sermon series, and trying to help people understand. Okay, this isn't a coded message about the end of the world.
Conspiracy theory?
No, it's
not
a genre
really.
called apocalypse, which is means revealing, and
So
it's very
that is what happened after a successful book series, TV series
Yeah.
that was done by the father of the director of The Chosen. So now he is doing something that is not the
and,
same.
and just to put a fine bow on it, let's just say that's a very modern and very non-universal interpretation of some scriptures that takes a lot of liberties, called millennial dispensationalism.
Yes.
That then became dominant in our culture to the point where much more thoroughly supported historical and academically informed readings of the scripture.
They just go over this.
They don't get people. They don't get the oxygen they need because it's been filled up by this very niche understanding that's been supported by dominant art.
Yes.
And so
now I'm looking at The Chosen. You know, there are some similarities. They're working with the scripture, but they're also interpreting it in a very creative,
which we've celebrated ways.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
They capture our attention.
Yeah.
They engage us. They fill in a lot of the blanks for us. However, now
you're
I'm cautious.
okay. Fair
Once
enough.
I found out the connection between, Jenkins, hold on, let me do some Googling. Oh, remember I actually texted you, so I think it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm
Yeah.
like, did you know?
And I was aware of that from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't
So,
know. So what will this show do to us?
That's a really good question.
After the seasons are over, maybe 10 years from now, will you be able to preach?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Will you be able to preach about the healing at the pool of Bethesda?
Yeah.
Without having the images of the show
Yeah.
in the congregation, in you,
Yeah,
I don't know.
What
I
you're
don't know.
describing is this popular imagination around Scripture came to dominate people's capacity to actually understand the Scripture
Or
itself.
critique it.
Yeah, and then so now you're imagining what if that happens with something. If that happens with the Book of Revelation, that's a little more. That's not as applicable to our everyday understanding of who Christ is. But if that happens with the Gospels, then that's very different.
And we don't know. We don't know. Right now,
Yeah.
we're just kind of following the show. We're having fun. But I just wondered.
Well, what
It was at 3 a.m. in the morning kind of a thought.
and so I think what you're highlighting here is, as much as we enjoy the show and we do, as much as we value the show and we do, we need to make sure that it doesn't become Scripture.
Yes.
That it is what it is, which is a inventive and imaginative and powerful show of entertainment that's trying to bring this alive in a
we
new
can't
way.
separate. Like there'll be scenes that I will never forget. But when
Yeah.
I read the scripture, I want to know that I'm remembering The Chosen.
Yeah.
Now, maybe this is the time for me to remember The Chosen and say, oh, that was cool. Or maybe this is the time for me to be intentional about, let's separate The Chosen and read the scripture
Yeah,
again.
because Simon is in the Gospels, Simon the Zealot, and the man who receives healing is in the Gospels, but their connection is an invention of the
Yes,
show,
yes,
right?
yeah,
and so
they're
things like that, you're right, need to be kept in mind as you
and
consider it. So
we'll just go. And it'll,
Okay.
I think there will be a ripple effect. later
okay,
on.
so
That's my
point well
nitpick.
taken. Well, my nitpicks are very different and much lower stake. So for one, Nathaniel said the vendor with the baby spit up on his coat made him nauseous. Well, first off, the word should be nauseated.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're nauseous, that's an aspect of your character. If you're nauseated, that's how you feel. So
Okay, gotcha.
there's a nitpick.
Okay.
That's a much lower stakes.
Okay,
So,
I rolled my eyes because I'm a mom of a 6-month-old.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
just
So
couldn't-
spit up's just on the horizon.
Yeah.
I did like in the montage in the beginning, the midwife has a makeshift surgical mask on. I'm gonna go on a limb and say that's probably not something, unless there was some religio-cultural significance of which I'm not aware. I don't think face coverings were consideration 200 years ago, let alone 2,000 years ago.
No, even in Middle Ages, they had no understanding that something that can come from another person can do something to you. Like
that's
the germs.
it's gonna be a little outside of their
yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
One of the things they're talking about when they're trying to chase down Rufus is he's going to his favorite restaurant. He's going to his favorite restaurant. Zheyna, do you think restaurants existed in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago?
Okay, so it's out of my comfort zone, but just not long time ago, I was listening to somebody talk about archaeological findings in Pompeii.
Uh-huh.
And they did find, there is no other way to describe it. It's a fast food kind of a
Okay.
bar
Yeah.
setup where you come, but there is also food involved because they
Yeah,
were like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
plates and pots that
Yeah.
you could get some lentils, I don't know, whatever. So yeah, like they ate in public places, and what do you call that?
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, it really triggered me. I'm not triggered, but it really set off an alarm bell.
Yeah.
And so I was Googling things like,
Restaurants
in Jerusalem when ? When were restaurants invented? Romans restaurants, yes or no? Like, so
What did you find?
I don't know. I found some allusion that what we think of as a restaurant probably started 1,000 years ago in China, but I don't know. So
I don't know, but
I don't know.
yeah.
It's just so funny on the lookout for things like that. Finally,
I think it's the language.
a nitpick that I think is kind of important, and I don't want to proclaim myself the authority on this. I just want to lift it up that the people being crucified had footrests and clothes on. So my understanding of the practice of crucifixion is, one, crucifixion in the nude was primarily the practice because the point is humiliation, right?
Yeah,
And so you
yeah.
wouldn't afford a crucified person the dignity of covering themselves, particularly in a community where being uncovered would be shameful, etc. And so that's typically the practice. And then two, the way by which crucifixion kills people is suffocation, primarily. And primarily when people become so exhausted in the act of crucifixion that they're no longer able to support their own weight, and so they ultimately the pressure on their body caused by the hanging from their arms and legs causes them to suffocate and die. It's one of the reasons why in gospel accounts they're saying, you know, they wanted to go ahead and hurry up the men dying, so they go around to break their legs, but Jesus had already died. And so the reason being, legs are broken so that they collapse, so they can't hold up their weight anymore, etc. And the footrest would really be antithetical to that purpose. So maybe it's happening for the purposes of trying to extend their suffering, but the way that it kills them is by suffocation. So I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of the art representation of it. There is always some kind of a footrest.
Sometimes you're right. Sometimes a little ledge, but
Yeah.
so.
But I know what you mean. In the episode, it was like a full blow.
It's a step. You know, it was a full step. So.
I don't know.
Either way, it's just a point to bring out. If you didn't understand how it was that crucifixion actually brings about someone's death, it's not loss of blood. It's actually the being suffocated by the inability to continue to bring air into your lungs when you reach the point of exhaustion. So, small detail. Okay, some deep dives. We've already done a lot of deep diving today, but want to go a little bit more. I've got one first.
Okay,
I just
go.
want to talk about the Zealots, this community. They specifically mentioned the concept of the Zealots of the fourth philosophy. And so, who are the Zealots and what are they doing? So the Zealots are absolutely historically accurate to this time and place. The foundation of the Zealots started around the time of Jesus' birth. The purpose of the Zealots were to a collection of extremely convicted and serious Jews who wished to remove the Roman occupation from the land of Israel. And absolutely one of the methods they would do so was murder and planned assassinations of the Roman officials, that were, they thought, participating in the partnership of the oppression, or even other Jews that were participating in it. And so that's really consistent historically with what, I don't know exactly how, with the montages and the training, and I don't know exactly how the Zealots were organized, but that is consistent. They were, it looks like the record of them ended shortly after the destruction of the temple in the year 70 by the Romans, and maybe a couple years later they had kind of a big standoff, it looks like. But so during Jesus' life, absolutely the Zealots would have been active, and they would have been one outlet for people who desired a deep change in the world. The word, they're also called Sicarii sometimes, in reference to that small knife, that small Roman knife that they would carry as a part of their assassination plots. And so the fourth philosophy is a reference to some other dominant sects in the world of Judaism at the time. There was the Pharisees, Shmuel, who we've seen, our Shmuel. There's the Sadducees, which I got a vibe. It felt like it was a Sadducee that was reading at the temple that Simon was listening to. I'm not really sure.
I don't know.
We're definitely going to see more of the Sadducees later, because they're the ones who are the priestly class that oversee temple worship in the heart of Jerusalem. They work very closely with the Romans. When they talk about like the high priest Caiaphas and things like that in this episode, that's a reference to the Sadducees, another sect of Judaism. There's the Essenes, who we haven't seen any of in this show. The Essenes are more mystical and ascetic, meaning like kind of living in denial of earthly pleasure and wealth. The Essenes have the most connection to our modern world today, and it's believed that they were the people who had a community at Qumran on the Dead Sea, from which the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the middle of last century, and those are many of our most complete in oldest copies of scripture yet in existence. And so,
actually, when they show Simon walking towards a cave, I thought he was becoming an Essene.
Did you really?
Because I thought, oh, that's a cave.
It looks like that's
I'm like, caves of Qumran, and then I got disappointed.
Yeah, and then so if those are three philosophies of Judaism, so to speak, well, the fourth philosophy would be the Zealots, which are the ones, we are also faithful, we are also deeply committed Jews, and our avenue is murder. And so that would have been a community that was absolutely in existence, and he's called Simon the Zealot in the New Testament. So the relationship with a man named Jesse who happens to be paralyzed, who happens to receive healing, that's an invention of the show, but Simon the Zealot is not.
Is not. My deep dive, my husband asked me about it. He was like, so what's up with that pool of Bethesda?
For sure.
Yeah,
The jacuzzi.
Jacuzzi. That's the answer. It was a jacuzzi. Bethesda means house of grace and mercy, and that's a Jewish name. But I feel like after that, the Jewish character of the place disappears. And they do mention in the show Asclepion. They call it Asclepion. So it is. And then Simon the Zealot has a problem with his brother being in this place. He's like, I can't believe you're here. So
it's pagan. It's wrong.
Yeah, it's pagan. It's Roman. So it is a. There is a debate where those pools were in Jerusalem. There is a place where they think that they were. That's actually a collection. Like there is several pools there that archaeologists discovered. What I was going to explain is what is Asclepion and who is Asclepius, and why would Jewish people have problem with that? So Asclepius was a Greek god, well, demigod. And he was the one that would hold the staff with the snake wrapped around it.
Yeah, which we see nowadays.
Yes, American Academy of Medicine or something like that.
Oh yeah, I don't know which one, but that's kind of like the universal symbol for the medical field.
Yes. So in those temples that were dedicated to Asclepius, and one of them was in Jerusalem, we know that. So they were places of healing, and right now, I guess if you use our language, we would describe it as places of holistic approach to healing.
Okay. Yeah.
So usually to get to Asclepion to receive healing, you were supposed to go through some cleansing, which would require baths. And then also you would probably have to go for several days through some certain of a cleansing diet to purge some stuff out of you. So after you have done that, you qualify to be inside Asclepion to receive the healing. You usually bring an offering. A lot of times people also brought like little statues of parts of their body that were hurting.
Yeah,
like you would show up in Asclepion with a foot. Because your foot is hurting.
For those of you who don't know.
It was in last week.
Yeah.
So we find a lot of different feet and hands and then you bring an offering.
Which is crazy because I've been carrying around a little model of my foot, but I have no one to give it to. So.
So and then once you are in Asclepion, you continue to do the purifying baths, and you also are treated by certain medicines. Maybe some hallucinogenic stuff.
Whatever they got.
Whatever you got. And the idea was for you to fall asleep.
Okay.
And once you fall asleep, there was a belief that you will be visited by God Asclepius or one of his children. And in that sleep, God Asclepius is going to tell you what's wrong with you and how to heal you.
Okay.
Once you wake up from that sleep, you find the priest and you tell him your dream, and the priest interprets it. Sometimes Asclepius showed up as a dog or a snake.
Okay.
By the way. So, very complicated, but what we see, so we don't see quite that happening in the episode. That was what you would expect of, a treat like I'm hurting, I'm going to go to Asclepion to
Yeah.
be healed. So that would be the expectation. We see some parts of it in the Pool of Bethesda story in the gospel, but not all of it.
Okay.
But people did stay there for a long time. You stay there until you receive the sleep, and then you continue the baths, especially if you can afford it. That is where it gets a little bit dicey too with our story. So the story of the Pool of Bethesda definitely has some parts of healing in an Asclepion, but not what you would normally see.
Which really transitions
Yeah.
well into where it is, what it'll preach, right? What it is that we want to take from the show. That week, Greg actually proclaims some good news out into the world, and I think it's really tied to the people that we see all the time who really need healing. And I think what the show does well. That's an invention of the show, but I think helps kind of maybe suss out what's happening when we read the gospel text is the idea of how someone could spend so much time there, because we see in the gospel text that this man has been there for a very long time.
Yes.
And how you could be there for so long and not receive the healing that you're looking for, and yet not see any other avenue for healing, and this stuckness, the eternal stuckness. And I think we see people a lot of times that are clinging to something that they hope changes their life for the better, or
And
they
it just
think
doesn't.
improves their situation or whatever. And sometimes it's kind of the American dream type stuff. Sometimes it's literal just superstition.
Yeah.
And it's really powerfully pointed out in the words of Jesus in this show. This pool has nothing for you. This pool has nothing for you, and you know it.
And you know it.
And you know it. Like at the end of the day, you know that just more of this is not going to result in the turnaround that you're looking for. And I know we see so much of that in the lives of the people who really want change. They earnestly want change. They do want to be healed. They don't see an avenue for it, and they just keep going down the same road that hasn't resulted in healing over and over again. That's what we see, and the good news is what Jesus has to say to him.
Yeah, my quote is, "You do not need the pool, you need me."
Yeah.
Again, not the words that we find in the Bible, but
Right.
in the show, when Jesus says that, it just encapsulates that. Yes, the world is telling you that this is the way to heal. The world is telling you that it's actually helps some people.
But you can
But
see it
I know
doesn't.
you.
Yeah.
I know your story, and I know what you need, and you need me. And
Yeah.
and you and I see it all the time that lives are transformed by Christ.
Yeah.
When people are open to receive the good news of Jesus Christ, the lives are transformed,
Yeah.
and people are healed in many ways.
Yeah.
So that's
That'll preach.
why I took a breath and I was like, whew.
That'll preach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that ties into me in the wow moment. For me, the big takeaway, as this is always our last segment of the after show, and the wow moment for me was actually walking away from the healing itself. At this point, we've seen a couple miraculous healings, and so it wasn't even the healing so much that was the wow moment for me, but reflecting on the intentionality of Jesus knowing what he's doing, healing that man at that time in that way. Because they ask him, why not you just, because Sabbath is sundown on Friday, it is sundown on Saturday, and the sun is going down on Saturday, so it's Shabbat. There's all these rules about what you can and can't do. You could wait 30 more minutes, the sun would be down, you can heal this man. There's no conflict with these Pharisaic leaders. And Jesus, and of course, he's got the great one-liner. Sometimes you just got to stir up the water. Bing, great one-liner. But what's wow for me was Jesus's full knowledge of the conflict of his ministry, the conflict that his ministry creates, the way that his ministry is received as threatening in the hearts of people, and yet who honestly need to be moved in a different direction, and the way in which he doesn't run from that. I don't see this as him being antagonistic, but I see it as him very directly not hiding, and certainly not allowing suffering to continue in the face of what needs to be done. So that was just really powerfully depicted in that wow moment of him choosing to do that in that way.
Yeah, my wow moment was different. It was Jesus walking to Jerusalem, and there's this few seconds when he looks at the crucified man.
Yep.
And then there is a shot of his face and this very complicated facial expression that, to the disciples around is not obvious, but for us, because we know the full story, we know what crucifixion is in Jesus's life, and how he sees that, but then also kind of like, I almost felt like not my time yet. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it, but
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that pause.
Well, what it made me think
Captivated
about
me.
when I was watching it was not just that Jesus knows that his journey includes the crucifixion,
Yeah.
but it includes the crucifixion there. That look outside the gates of Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's going into this work to heal and to proclaim, and the consequence of that healing and proclamation is going to lead him right there to that spot at the cross.
Yeah.
And so what does he do? Keeps going in.
He just, there's like kind of like, huh? And
Here we
he keeps
go.
on going.
Season 2, Episode 4 of The Chosen. And The Chosen After Show, friends, I'm so glad that you watched the show with us. I'm glad you watched the After Show with us. We air these live on Tuesday evenings on Facebook. Zheyna and I watch along and chat. If you've got questions, of course, if you're just now catching up, you can go back and watch the previous episodes of this. We hope that you find joy in our deep dives and our nitpickings, and hoping that you can find something intriguing in these episodes with us along with us as we watch. Friends, it's been great to be with you. We'll see you next week. Bye. Take care.
Bye.